you get to the quilting part of your quilt, you have a choice. Do you do hand quilting or do you do machine quilting, or even both? But how on earth do you decide? Because each of them have their pros and cons. So in this video, I'm going to take you through both of them to help you decide which is right for you. Who am I? I am Kim. This is Quilt with Kim. You, my lovely, are very, very welcome. And let's start by talking about hand quilting. Hand quilting goes back many thousands of years. In fact, there are records of the ancient Egyptians who do hand quilting their clothes. So you are in great company. Hand quilting gives a softer, perhaps more textured look and finish. And that also gives you that more traditional look that you may be after. But what about its pros and its cons? So on the positive side, I would say hand quilting is relaxing, it's meditative, and you can pretty much sit anywhere with it. If you're feeling confident, then you can go for the more intricate designs like camphor embroidery, or maybe more structured patterns like sashiko, neither of which you can actually do with a machine. They are very hand quilting orientated. Hand quilting is great for smaller projects like this one behind me. It's also great if you have a small throat on your machine. That's the bit that you waggle your hand through, and there's no way with the throat on your machine that you'd get a quilt through it, or you think your machine will just quite frankly struggle. Finally, hand quilting is also perfect if you love that traditional handmade look. It does have its negative side though. Hand quilting can be time consuming. It can also be physically demanding on your hands and your wrists, and you need to take care of yourself. Both when you're holding your quilt, whether it's a big quilt or a small quilt, or if you're holding your needle for long periods of time too. Larger quilts, it can just take a long time to finish. Okay, so what about machine quilting then? So machine quilting really came into its own when sewing machines came onto the scene in how we know them today. So if you stick a walking foot on, it's a really quick way to get your quilting done. Free motion quilting can be even quicker if you go for a simple all over design. Machine quilting can definitely cope with your bigger projects. It copes with them quicker and probably more efficiently too. It also gives a more uniform look, which is something that you may prefer. So if we look at the positives, machine quilting is much faster than hand quilting, especially for your large quilts or when you're up against a deadline. It's far easier to achieve the consistent and precise stitching on a machine, and it'll handle complicated patterns for you. With machine quilting, there are loads and loads of design options, like combinations of straight lines with your walking foot, no end of options with free motion quilting, and that's even before you get to using your rulers, and even some machines have computerized patterns built into the machine. Okay, so on the not so great side, machine quilting obviously requires a sewing machine, but for big quilts you need a good throat size on your machine, and those machines can be a bit pricier and obviously need a bit more of a financial investment. However, side note, these bigger machines also go a lot faster, and they will handle your quilts a lot better than perhaps the more basic and entry level machines. Machine quilting can feel more technical, and it might lack that handmade and that tactile look and feel, and indeed the texture of hand quilting that you may be after. Okay, so How do you decide which is right for you? Do you go for machine quilting or do you go for hand quilting? First up then, here's the questions. How patient are you? Not so much. And how much time have you got? Hand quilting, I think, is fab for those who enjoy the slow stitching and are using it to relax and keep your hands busy in front of the TV, for instance. Hand quilting is also portable, especially on smaller projects, so you can take your quilt on holiday or just travelling around with you. It's also great if your machine can handle the piecing okay, but it's likely to throw all of its toys out of its pram when it comes to quilting, especially with those larger quilts. Machine quilting is probably better if you're either short on time, you have a deadline to finish, or, like me, you just like to get on with it and get your quilt finished. Okay, next question. What style do you prefer? If you like the traditional rustic look, then definitely go for hand quilting. If you like the uniform, clean lines, then machine quilting is your friend. Okay, what about, importantly, mobility issues, particularly if in your hands and your wrists, and maybe even your neck and the back of your neck here, because hand quilting can be tiring on your hands and your wrists, especially if you do a lot of it. So if you have joint issues or neck issues, then machine quilting might actually be your answer. Okay, next, how big is your project? For larger projects and your big quilts, then machine quilting might be the more practical answer for you. It is definitely quicker, and if you have a big enough throat space for your project, it is far easier to handle. For your smaller quilts like this one or decorative projects, then hand quilting would add that little extra handmade love and charm. Okay, what about equipment then? So hand quilting doesn't need very much. You need some thread, you need some betweens needles and maybe a thimble, and you're pretty much good to go. Machine quilting obviously needs a sewing machine, and that sewing machine needs to happily quilt the size of your quilt. It needs various accessories. You definitely need a walking foot to deal with the layers, and they can be expensive depending on the brand of your machine. Maybe you also need an extension table as well. Now, these are very useful, undoubtedly, but you could achieve the same ends if you pile books around your machine to take everything up to the same level, and that would take the weight of your quilt. When you're quilting a quilt, you will also need a dedicated space because machine quilting needs lots of it. It needs lots of space around the machine, around your sewing table to take the weight of your quilt, to support the quilt whilst you're doing your actual quilting. Okay, so you could, of course, combine your hand quilting and your machine quilting. There's no reason at all why you couldn't machine quilt perhaps the main body and then hand quilt round the borders or the smaller accent areas. It really depends on the look and the feel that you're going for. But if you get that combination, it will really give your quilt a completely unique look, which will be personal to you. So my advice is to actually try both. See which one you prefer to use as your main quilting style. There really is no right or wrong. My personal style, if you ask me, and as you're watching this, you can't ask me, so I'm going to tell you. So my personal preference is for machine quilting. That's what I go to all the time. But I am playing with Sashko for some smaller projects. I love it, and I do like the structured look of it. I also love Cantha as well. It's really easy to do. So My advice really is to experiment and play. As I said, there's no absolute right or wrong answer. It has to be what's right for you. It's the joy and the relaxation that we're after. So as long as you find that, you have got your answer. However, I hope through this video that I've helped you to make a decision out of each of these. Please don't forget to check out my courses. Check out the links down below if you want to learn machine quilting. And in the meantime, please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I really must stop doing that as it really does help my channel to grow. I hope that it's helped, and I will love you and leave you for now and see you next time. Bye for now.